Bad News in Business Communications by Cecily Kerr. I am sure that you have heard the question, do you want the good news or the bad news first? Generally, when I hear that question, I immediately think, oh no, bad news, not, oh yay, good news. We all hate bad news. Even the suggestion of bad news makes us worried and upset.
No wonder there is so much information about communicating bad news effectively in the business world. And sadly, everyone at some point must deliver bad news in business. Because bad news disappoints, irritates, and sometimes angers the receiver, these messages must be written carefully. So it is important we understand the aspects of delivering bad news. In this presentation, you will learn when to use the direct strategy and when to use the indirect strategy to deliver bad news. You will discover important goals and know how to deliver bad news in person and properly apologize.
Important goals. As a business communicator working with bad news, you will have many goals, but it is important to remember
these important goals. Explain the news clearly and completely. Your goal is to make your readers understand and, in the best case, accept the bad news. Recipients should not have to clarify your message. Project a professional image in your communication. Even when irate customers sound threatening and overstate their claims, you should stay calm, use polite language, and respond with clear explanations of why the negative message was necessary. Be fair to them. When you can show that the decision was fair, impartial, and rational, receivers are far more likely to accept the negative news. Convey empathy and sensitivity to the receiver. Use language that respects the receiver, but also attempts to reduce bad feelings. When appropriate, accept blame and apologize. Maintain friendly relationship with them. Demonstrate your desire to continue pleasant relations with the receiver and to regain their confidence. Remember to keep communication open and honest. Choose the best communication channel for the situation at hand. These goals are ambitious, and frankly, you may not achieve them all. However, many communicators have found these strategies are helpful in conveying bad news sensitively. Using the direct strategy. The direct strategy saves time and is preferred by some who think it is more professional and ethical than the indirect strategy. Unlike the indirect strategy, this strategy brings out the bad news first, and then explains the reasons for the bad news. The direct strategy may be more effective in situations such as the following. When the bad news is not damaging, if the bad news is insignificant, such as a small increase in cost, and doesn't personally affect the receiver. When the receiver may overlook the bad news. Changes in service, new policy requirements, and legal announcements. These critical messages may require boldness to ensure attention. When the receiver prefers directness. Some companies and individuals expect all messages, even bad news, to be straightforward. When firmness is necessary. Messages that must demonstrate determination should not use delaying techniques. For example, the last in a series of collection letters that seek an overdue payment require a direct opener. Using the indirect strategy. Many communicators prefer to use the indirect strategy to soften bad news. Whereas good news can be revealed quickly, bad news may be easier to accept when broken gradually. The indirect strategy does not reveal the bad news immediately. This strategy lets you keep the reader's attention until you have fully explained the reasons for the bad news. Steps in the indirect strategy. Buffer. Start with a neutral statement that both reader and writer can agree on, such as a compliment, appreciation, a quick review of the facts, or an apology. Reasons. Present valid reasons for the bad news, avoiding words that create a negative tone. Bad news. De-emphasize the bad news. Use the passive voice, emphasize the positive, and suggest a compromise if possible. Closing. Renew good feelings with a positive statement. Avoid referring to the bad news. Include sales promotional material, if appropriate, and look forward to future business. When to use the indirect strategy. When the bad news is personally upsetting. If the negative news involves the receiver personally, such as a layoff notice, telling an employee that he or she no longer has a job is best done in person and by giving reasons first. Also, when a company has made a huge mistake and must let the customer know. When the bad news will provoke a hostile reaction. The indirect strategy encourages the reader to finish reading or hearing the message. A blunt announcement may make an upset receiver stop reading. When the bad news threatens the customer relationship. Beginning slowly and presenting reasons can help salvage the customer bond more than directly announcing bad news or failing to adequately explain the reasons. When the bad news is unexpected. Readers who are surprised by bad news have a more negative reaction than those who expected it. The indirect approach does not guarantee that recipients will be pleased, because after all, bad news is just that, bad. But many communicators prefer to use it because by revealing bad news slowly and preparing the receiver, you soften the impact.
Delivering bad news in person.
All of the information. Cool down and get the facts before marching in on the boss or confronting someone. Prepare and rehearse. Outline what you plan to say so that you are confident, coherent, and dispassionate. Explain past, present, and future. If you are telling the boss about a problem such as a computer crash, explain what caused the crash, the current situation, and how and when you plan to fix it. And consider taking a partner. If you fear a shoot-the-messenger reaction, especially from your boss, bring a colleague with you. To lend credibility to your view, call auditors, inspectors, or human resource experts. Think about timing. Do not deliver bad news when someone is already upset. Also, don't give bad news on Friday afternoon when people have the weekend to dwell on it. Be patient with the reaction. Give the receiver time to vent, think, recover, and act wisely. Apologizing. At some point, you will make a mistake, so it is important to handle your apology correctly to preserve your business image. Apologize promptly. Credibility suffers when a public figure delays an apology and responds only after causing an outrage. Apologize sincerely. People dislike apologies that sound hollow, like, "We regret that you were inconvenienced." Focusing on your regret does not convey sincerity. Explaining what you will do to prevent recurrence of the problem does. Apologies should acknowledge responsibility and show remorse. Use good judgment. Before admitting blame, it is wise to consult a superior or the company legal counsel to avoid litigation. This presentation was about confronting bad news in business organizations. We discussed important goals using the direct strategy, using the indirect strategy, delivering bad news in person, and properly apologizing. So, delivering bad news in business may not be as easy as asking, do you want the good news or the bad news first? The bad news is there is no good way to deliver bad news. But the good news is that even though this topic is complicated, you will be glad you know the specifics of handling bad news in business, because at some point, you will have to deal with bad news.